The Atlanta Falcons concluded yet another losing season. They finished the year 4-12. And today I wanted to talk about what's next for the Falcons and what I think they should do if they want to have success in the future. But anyways, before we do get started with today's video, make sure you hit that like button if you guys enjoyed, as it really helps out the channel and it shows your support for this content. Subscribe if you guys are new and enjoyed the videos on here, as I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and you also won't miss out on any new videos. I forgot to add that. Also, going back to the 1,000 subscribers thing, as a special, once we hit our goal, I will react to my first 2 videos I ever made on this channel. So if you guys want to see that and enjoy the videos on here, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss out and so you guys can see that special. But anyways, with that being said, let's get started with today's video. And I want to start out by talking about the Falcons roster. And let's just start out with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is a pretty good quarterback, and frankly, he's kind of underrated in my opinion, as the guy, compared to Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and all, hasn't exactly gotten the credit he deserves. But anyways, this year he had a pretty good year, passing for 4,581 yards and 26 touchdowns, completing 65% of his passes. There is a slight chance, I guess you could say, that he gets traded. More on that later. I mean, I do know there's that one report, but anyways, more on that later. But even then, Matt Ryan is still a very good quarterback. Next up, I want to talk about Julio Jones. And Julio Jones he's a very good wide receiver. How else do I put it? He's just one of the best wide receivers in the league right now. One of the best wide receivers of this generation, and one of the best wide receivers of all time. And the guy, he's just been good partners with Matt Ryan, I guess you could say, for like a good portion of his career. Don't quote me on when he was drafted and all, okay? I don't exactly remember that. But anyways, Julio Jones is still an amazing receiver, despite only playing 9 games this year, as he did struggle with injury. But anyways, in those 9 games, he still played pretty well, receiving for 771 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, and he caught 75% of his targets. Next up, I want to talk about Calvin Ridley. And Calvin Ridley, he was just amazing in the absence of Julio Jones and really stepped up big time when the Falcons really needed him, as this guy, he had an amazing season with 1,374 receiving yards, 9 receiving touchdowns, and he caught 63% of his targets. Moving on, I want to talk about Hayden Hurst, who proved to be a very valuable offseason pickup for them via trade with the Baltimore Ravens. They lost Austin Hooper, and Hayden Hurst was a pretty good replacement, receiving for 571 yards, 6 receiving touchdowns, catching 64% of his targets. Next up, I want to talk about Russell Gage. Russell Gage, like Calvin Ridley, he did not have as good of a season as Calvin Ridley, obviously, but even then, he stepped up when those Falcons needed him most, as Julio Jones did miss a good portion of the year, and Russell Gage, he played pretty well, receiving for 786 yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, catching 66% of his targets. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, I want to talk about Grady Jarrett. Grady Jarrett, to me, is a really good defensive lineman, and he's been pretty underrated the past few years. And the Falcons defense, them being pretty bad, does not help that at all. But even then, Grady Jarrett is a pretty good player. Now, he did have a down year, I will say that, but he's still a pretty good player. This past season, he had 4 sacks and 29 pressures. Next up, I want to talk about Deion Jones. Deion Jones is a pretty good linebacker who, frankly, to me, hasn't exactly gotten the credit he deserves, as the Falcons defense has sucked over the past few years, but Deion Jones has been one of the few bright spots on that defense. He's a nice, solid all-around linebacker, and this past season, he had 4.5 sacks, a forced fumble, 2 interceptions, 6 passes defended, and 15 pressures. Next up, and the final player I want to talk about AJ Terrell. AJ Terrell's a pretty solid cornerback, and while he was not amazing or like a top tier corner by any means, he was still not too bad, with 1 interception, 7 passes defended, and 3 forced fumbles. Anyways, with that being said though, that will wrap it up for today's roster. Now, obviously this roster is very good offensively, and they were the top 5 passing offense, which is very good, and I mean, they just have a really good receiving core. Now, while they improved, defensively at least, they improved, they are still not that good defensively. They were pretty good against the run, but they were really bad against the passes. They were last in passing defense, but they were 6th in running defense, so obviously that is not bad. Now, the hiring of Arthur Smith to me was a very good move, as Arthur Smith did some pretty good things in Tennessee as the offensive coordinator. And if you ask me, he can definitely help maximize the offensive talent on this team, and in all honesty, I think he can just be a really good coach for them. Now, unfortunately, Atlanta is 29th in cap space, so I do not think they will be doing much in free agency, even if they were to move on from Matt Ryan or Julio Jones. So don't expect them to do a ton in this year's free agency. Now, they have some big contracts, and it's going to be... Now, Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, yeah, let's just talk about those trade rumors. Now, Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, as we all know, have spent their entire careers with the Falcons, and it's safe to say, while they have contributed to some pretty good teams, at the same time, they've contributed to some pretty not good teams. And a report did come out that the Falcons do not plan on trading Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. And my thoughts on that is, well, in all honesty, I think it's time that they do move on from Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Now, obviously, I don't think I'm going to say this. I don't think the Falcons will do it, but I do think they should trade Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Now, their large contracts, as I was saying before, will be hard to move off of. So maybe they do try to restructure it, but I would move on from Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. And the reason why is because I don't know if I really see them winning a title with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. These guys are aging, and while I do think they can still be very productive even at pretty old ages, well, at least in football terms, I still don't know if they will win a championship. And if you ask me, I think it's time that they kind of commit fully to a rebuild. And I mean, unless they start improving that defense drastically, I don't know if the Falcons really are going to be able to, I don't know if they are winning a championship with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. How else do I put it? Not only that, if they were to trade them, they could get some pretty decent value in return. Matt Ryan is worth some pretty decent draft picks, and Julio Jones can definitely net you a mid to late, a decent first plus maybe another draft pick. They can net you a pretty good return, which can help you build a team. Now, I'm going to go over some trade partners for Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, even if they do choose not to trade these guys. Some trade partners for Matt Ryan could be guys teams like the Patriots, the Bears maybe, the Colts, and the 49ers. Now, the Bears, some teams will just be in cap space hell if they do take on these contracts, but these are some options. Some other options could include the Patriots, the Ravens, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Eagles, and the football team for Julio Jones. And if you ask me, even then, I still don't expect this team to be too aggressive in free agency, and I expect them to look to the draft to address their weaknesses. Now, in the draft, I think they could maybe go a quarterback in the draft if their plan is to, just have Matt Ryan mentor that young quarterback. And some quarterback prospects they could select at least is Zach Wilson, Justin Fields. They can definitely be available when the Falcons are picking. If not, then they can definitely try and improve that defense, which they just got to improve since that defense is not good. They need to improve that defense. And that could be a cornerback or an edge player. They need to improve that defense somehow. Now, some options they could have if they do choose to decide to choose a defensive player with their first round pick could be someone like Patrick Surtain or Caleb Farley, or maybe even someone like Micah Parsons. Or maybe Kwity Paye. They need to improve that defense just somehow, as I said before, as their defense is just not good. But to really summarize, I guess, just my point as really in this video, the Falcons, in my opinion, even though I don't think they will move on from Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, I think they should move on from those guys. But if not, maybe they decide to see that the NFC South, hey, it's going to be wide open this year. Maybe they think they can win. But either way, the Falcons need to do something quick. I do like the hire of Arthur Smith, and if they do choose not to take their quarterback for the future, at least in the next 10 years in this year's draft, I do think they should try and improve their defense, and I think they'll build mainly through the draft. But anyways, with that being said, that will be it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button, as it really helps out the channel and it shows your support for this content. Subscribe if you guys are new and enjoyed the videos on here, as I am trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and it would mean a lot to me if we could reach that goal. Once we hit 1K, I will react to my first 2 videos once we hit our goal. So if you guys want to see that and enjoy the videos on here, make sure to subscribe. But with that being said, I'm out, you guys.